Our interview this morning is with Michael Guthrie, better known as Mike. Mike was born in Cleburne, Texas in July of 1940. He served in the United States Army from December of 1964 until December of 1966. His highest rank attained was E4, Specialist Fourth. This recording is being done at Burleson, Texas. My name is Dale. I'm not related to Mike in any way. Also in the room we have Milton Gibson and Gary Burton, who are our videographers. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also for Operation Remember for the city of Burleson, Texas. This recording is being done on Friday, January the 7th, year 2011. And with that little introduction, Mike, you can tell us your story of when you were in the Army. Might start with why you chose the Army or why the Army chose you.
Yes, well, thank you. The Army chose me. I was drafted. I got my greetings, and prior to December when I actually went in, I think that the greetings arrived where I was living in Guthrie. I believe it was around about a month ahead of that, about November. So I felt honored that the United States government and also the Army portion, I felt like it was selection. I felt like that so I felt there was a worthy cause, and they sent me to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training and AIT training, and accomplished that with the help of a lot of sergeants, especially sergeants. And but anyway, after leaving there, well, before leaving there, rather, they asked for volunteers to go into airborne. And so my first question was, well, I have to will it be added extra time on my service career? And they said, no. All you got to do is just pass the qualification PT test, and which I did. And so arriving at Fort Benning, Georgia for the airborne training, jump school, it was very good. I not only accomplished the physical training, but I saw within that I accomplished a lot of mental alertness training in there, along with my other buddies that were alongside me. And upon leaving there, well, they said, okay, I was needed elsewhere in the other parts of the world, namely Vietnam. And I didn't know too much about Vietnam. Just had casually heard about it. So they sent me over by ship by the USS St. Patrick. It was a merchant marine troop carrier ship, and developed a lot of relationships with other GIs, and that was real good. Stopped in Hawaii for about a 10-hour layover, and I got to go and visit Hawaii, the only time in my life I ever got to visit Hawaii. That was good. And got back on the ship, and we traveled further in the journey to Guam. I had about an 8-hour layover there, and got to go aboard and that little island, see a little bit of that land, and it was good. And got back on the boat, and then they started our journey again to Okinawa. And for guerrilla warfare training, about 30 days. And that was very educational. 30 days is not adequate training for jungle warfare training. I learned just enough to get myself really killed. That's from my perspective. But it was valuable, though, even with saying that. And anyway, after about 30 days, well, then they flew me on by aircraft C-130, I along with some others. And arriving at Vietnam, it was extremely hot. Now, and while I was in Okinawa, that was hot also. They were in the Orient, so it was very, very hot. Arrived there in Vietnam, I believe it was August or September of 1965. The main body of my unit I was with, 173rd Airborne Brigade, had already arrived there in the month of May of 1965. The first time that setting foot on that land called Vietnam, I was out helping string concertina wire. The rest of the body of the brigade was up in the highlands called Pleiku, and so there was just only a skeleton crew or a skeleton bunch of us left there for the back at Benoit area to keep things maintained and guard duty and everything that goes along with that. And upon stringing this concertina wire, right away I ripped my hand. I mean, I was just bleeding profusely. And so I went up to the Como shack tent, which that's short for a communications shack. And so I asked this sergeant, I said, I need a Band-Aid. He said, you need a what? I don't believe I heard you correctly. I said, I need a Band-Aid. My hand is bleeding awful here. He said, we got troops out there on the field, out in the battlefields, lying and maimed and dying, and you come in here and have the audacity to ask for a Band-Aid. He said, you get your ASS out of here. He said it, and I spelled it. And don't you ever come back in here and ask for a Band-Aid again. Needless to say, I didn't get a Band-Aid. I just went ahead and toughed it on out. And I became, in that moment of time, I became toughened up in that type of respect, becoming like bark on a tree. I started getting tougher because his response was tough, and so I had to just go with the flow. And anyway, cut right to the chase, many of our operations were search and destroy, with the exception of LRPs, that means long-range patrols. But almost, because the unit I was with was a strike outfit, so it was just mostly search and destroy operations. And we lost a lot of, I lost a lot of my buddies. We got, and that was a rough, tough aspect in any war, to get real, real close with some of your buddies, and then they're with you one day, and then the next day they're not. And I could name many, many areas that we were in, Hobo Woods, Iron Triangle, War Zone C, War Zone D, on and on and on. But there's some of these missions and operations and the battles, some of them just stand out in one's mind more so than maybe others, and I'm pretty sure that goes along with other veterans also. And one that was very, very outstanding memory-wise was an operation we had in February the 26th of 1966. And we were in very heavy foliage. Our destination, or objective rather, was Fuloy. And there was a lot of mistakes made on this operation. Many, many mistakes. Namely, we should not have been out there a company size alone. Based on recon reports, there was strong enemy activity out there. And I won't get into any blame game because that's not my purpose. I don't have any regrets of serving in the Army. No regrets whatsoever. I did my job, what I was trained to do, and I don't just feel like it. I know that I accomplished what I was trained in my skill of performance with the 81 millimeter mortar. And there were times when the foliage was so heavy that I couldn't use that, so I just resorted to my M16 and along with line troops. But anyway, getting back on about the operation there going to Fouloy, the guy that was on point, and I don't recall his name, but he was well versed. He knew the lay of the land very much because he'd had extensive training at Okinawa. And so, when you live that stuff and you breathe that stuff and you feel it from day to day, I mean, I don't know, you become so adaptable, you just know it like the back of your hand. And that's kind of like the qualifications of this good trooper up on point. And he kept calling back to the CO, who's, probably about the middle of the column. And he was having to use his, the guy up on point again, having to use his machete to cut the way through because the foliage was so heavy. And he kept calling back every great so often, sir, with his RTO, radio telegraph operator. He said, sir, we need to halt up. I feel like we need to really hold up. And so the captain reported back to him, he said, well, give me a cause and reason. He said, I can't put my finger on it, but I know that something is not right. Well, this happened on a repeated basis about 3 or 4 times. And past the 4th time, we walked straight into an ambush. They were dug in, waiting on us. We had happened onto a regiment size of Viet Cong. They were dug in trench. They threw everything at us. And if anyone knows the status of a rifle company, they usually remain about 110 to 115 men strong. And by nightfall, after that was a very fierce battle, we were down to 47 men. Not every one of those now that from down to 47 were killed, KIAs, but many was wounded and evacuated out of there. But on the onset of it, the officers called in for air support. Not air support at that moment, artillery support. And that wasn't adequate. And they were right on top of us, or we were right on top of them, whichever way you want to describe it. And so then one of the officers, I've been the CO, called in for airstrike, and something went wrong again right there at that point. You got different colors of smoke to help out the pilot of he's either F-104 or F-105. And so there was a mistake. And I'm repeating what some of the other guys that told me. I don't know all this information just collectively by myself, but other sergeants and other my buddies there was telling me all these, so I remember a lot of it. And so something went amiss on the color of the smoke, either on one side of the perimeter or the other. And these CBUs, there's 100 of those to a box, and when they release them from the aircraft, then these little yellow bombs with the fins, they cock out, and the largest percentage went on us instead of the Viet Cong. I say the largest percentage. And so that we almost got annihilated on this because of all these different mistakes. And I'm very thankful, very appreciative that I came out alive. There was one of the guys, one of my buddies in my squad, not only in my platoon, but one in my squad. We were real close. and he got KIA. And so it was hitting real close to home, so to speak. And then right about, that was February the 26th, and less than a month later, in fact, the designated day was March the 16th, to be exact. I believe this is in War Zone D. We had another fierce battle, and that was when I got wounded. And they medevaced me to 3rd Field Hospital in Saigon. I was there, I believe it was 2 days, 2 or 3 days. Then they flew me out to recuperate in the United States, because they said it would take too long to go to Yokohama, Japan, or one of these other stationary places. And so I went to, they like I say, and I was aboard a C-141 flying hospital ship, and every wounded soldier in there was on stretchers. And the only ones walking around was either doctors or nurses or like that. I mean, male nurses. And it was totally full. I mean, just from the front of the aircraft all the way back to the rear. And so I came to, they brought me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That was on the, let's see, I was shipped out the 19th of March, and arrived, because the international date line, I arrived on the 19th. I thought that was really something else there. I don't understand all that stuff. Anyway, so stayed there at Fort Sill through healing up and rehab, and because of the wound to the shoulder area. And I did get wounded in the buttocks area, but I don't ever talk about that too much. Several months there at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And so the doctor, he was the rank of a captain. He wanted to go ahead and put me into just regular Army regular. We call those legs. That's what the airborne, you got all these little cliche terms, so we call them legs, but they're good legs, okay? So I asked for an audience with him, and he said, okay, I'll grant you that. So we debated back and forth. We didn't argue. We didn't get into severe negative discussion. I just told him I wanted to remain airborne. And he said, why? Kept asking why. And I said, well, none other than spirit de corps. I said, I like airborne. Well, little did I know that what I was asking for is coming right out of the fire, right straight into the frying pan. So he said, well, I'm going to go ahead and let you remain airborne. He said, you'll have to go through a refresher course anyway, where I'm going to send you to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, with the 82nd Airborne. If you don't make the refresher course, then, hey, you're automatically going into regular Army ground pounder. I said, okay, that sounds fair enough. So I went through the refresher course. I noticed the cables out of the 34-foot jump tower, I noticed they were real slack. I noticed that. And I heard a couple weeks later that, I believe it was 2 days after I jumped out of that a special forces guy jumped out of it and got killed. Because that cable was way far too slack, and I guess it just took in all that embrittlement relief it could stand, and it just snapped, and probably landed wrong. Well, anyway, while a lot of things happened there at Fort Bragg, I thought I was through with the fighting. I mean, with real bullets. Now, we go through training with, blanks and stuff like that, but I thought I was through. Not so. Well, you have to, in those days, I guess it's still the same now, had to make one qualification jump a month to remain on airborne status. Back then, it was $55 a month just to get that extra. And of course, my starch on the fatigues and shoe polish on my boots eat the biggest, largest part of that up. So, but anyway, made a few helicopter jumps. Made a few C-130 jumps. Now here comes a great big, real large challenge to me. I never had made a jump out of a jet. They're going to load us aboard a C-141, just like the one they brought me back from Vietnam on, only this wasn't a medical aircraft. It was, just ready for combat and anything else like that, regular cargo. That's what the C stands for. So there was 60 of us loaded aboard this C-141, going to do this jet blast, that's what they call it. And had shields on it back there so that the heat would not come into our T-10 parachutes and cause it to do a Mae West and, all that. So we, like good soldiers following orders, we do equipment check, and all go through all the regular stuff that we go through each time. And whoever's flying this bird, either a captain or a colonel, I'm pretty sure, by the time we was ready to leave the rampart, it didn't happen. And so everybody looking at everybody, well, nobody knows what's going on, so. But we knew that something wasn't in the regular norm. So finally, we could tell by the movement of the aircraft, it coming back around and taxied back around, and finally came to a stop. He braked it, and after probably a couple minutes, the tailgate went down, and there was an officer, probably either a lieutenant or a captain, I don't remember for sure. But anyway, and then an E6 sergeant was right beside him. He said, "Okay, no questions. Start filing out and pull off your main parachutes, put them over here in one stack, and your reserves, put them over here in this other stack." Okay, been good little obedient troops. We did that very thing. He said, "There's some deuce and a halfs out there, trucks for you to get on, and they'll carry you back to your barracks." We did that. About 2 hours later, word came handed down that some rigger who packs the parachutes had flipped out for I don't know what cause, and had poured battery acid on 17 mains and reserve chutes. And he was on the intent of committing mass murder. And so I'm very thankful and appreciative that I was taken care of by the Lord God again. And so then another qualification jump was on hand before I got out. This is getting close to my EROS date, and December was coming up pretty fast. And I believe it was in the month of November, I was scheduled for a helicopter jump at night, and we were going to be in training for scissoring through some highline wires. And I'm pretty sure these highline wires weren't loaded with electricity and stuff like that, but it's for training purposes. Going to be at night. And about almost the last minute, word was handed down to me. It'd been aborted, Guthrie. You're not supposed to go on it tonight. I never have found out to this very date why that was canceled out. Possibly the Lord knew that what might happen or could happen, or it just wasn't my time to go on a night training a mission like that. So may never know. Well, if he deems it necessary for me to know, he'd probably let me know one of these days. And I got out in I believe it was the 10th of December of 1966. I remember as I was processing out that day, I had a big NPD written on my first sheet, and so I didn't know what that stood for. I made an inquiry to one of the sergeants around there that was helping us process that, and I said, "What's this NPD?" And he said, "That means no pay due." I said, "Why? I've got money coming to me. I got leave time. So they did a preliminary check. They said, no, in fact, you went overboard on your leave time. I said, no way. So just preliminary check, found out that back in Vietnam, somebody had taken some leave time, and I'm assuming the clerk put it down on my record. They said, well, in order to get this straightened out, you're going to have to remain here about 2 weeks' time, two more weeks past your EROS date. I said, it can't happen. I'm supposed to get out today. I said, that's what I'm going to choose. So that never was straightened out. I've made efforts to try to get it straightened out, and no one's been able to do it. So, but let me just share this one valuable note about this. My duty, my serving, which I have no regrets whatsoever, even with all these happenings I've described. No regrets. My wife went to a Ladies Aglow meeting in Fort Worth, Texas. I believe it was in now I got out in 1966, but I believe this Aglow meeting was probably sometime in 1975. And of course they had name tags to identify, So this lady walked up to my wife and she saw the name Guthrie, Linda Guthrie on there. And she said, well, I know some Guthries. She said, well, I married a Guthrie. And she said, well, who? And told my name, Michael Guthrie. She said, well, I know him. She said, well, dear child, she said, I'd like for you to come over here and sit down with me. I want to share something with you. She said, okay. She said, I've known Michael and his brother Thomas. I've known them for their whole life. And she said, while Michael was over in Vietnam, she said, the Lord would wake me up at night in the wee hours of the morning for me to pray for Michael. And she would get out of that nice, cozy, warm bed and start praying for me on her knees. And she said it happened more than once. So I'm eternally grateful for an opportunity to serve my fellow man and serve this great, blessed country that the Lord has blessed so wonderfully, still is, and eternally grateful for the saints of God that interceded and prayed for me when I needed someone to stand in the gap for me. I'm very grateful.
Good story, Mike. And yeah, you've had a lot of help along the way. Had somebody watching out for you.
Yes.
In listening, we've talked to lots of guys that went over to Fort Polk. Not all good stories. But I guess the one I wonder about,
Yes,
you went to jump school at Benning. Never having been airborne, at some point in time, they take you up that tower and you take that first step.
Yes, sir.
What's that like? How high is the tower, the first jump you do?
Okay, the one that you actually go down with a parachute, I don't think it's a T-10 parachute. Of course, they got big, different type chutes now, more akin to sports chutes. The description, the only way I know how to describe it, it's of course we're trained all along the way progressively into that, or get our mindset for it and everything. And so you have some little preliminary, helping ways toward that. But the actual, that's 250 foot up in the air from the big towers and the big arms that come out. And it's quite a sensation. I mean, it's real hard to describe. There's none other like it because I've jumped off of roofs of house before when I was real young, for meaningful purposes, and that's quite a. But here's what we were taught to do a PLF. There's 5 points of contact, and you learn how to roll, even with that jump from that 250-foot tower. And you got a point of contact. The first point of contact is like the back of your calf, and your hip, and your butt, and your shoulder, and side, and your shoulder. So there's 5 points of contact, and switch either way. And
So you're supposed to land on your side, Mike?
this is all one big roll.
Okay.
Well, one big roll. You just lightly touch each area. Now, when I was over in Vietnam, we had to make qualification jump. We had the area real strongly secured, and strongly secured. So I did 2. Because of the humidity over there, I did a stand-up landing, which you're really not supposed to do. You can get court-martial for that because of injury. You're prone to get an injury. So as soon as I did a stand-up landing, I just go ahead and go into my roll. So keep everybody on their safe side, sergeants and everybody. But I remember one time you asked me about this, about the jump. How did it feel and everything? And whenever they pull you up, that's chute and trooper and everything. When they pulling you up, right before they release you, well, there's a sergeant down on the ground, and he's got this big bullhorn, and he says, "What are you?" And you're supposed to holler out, and you can see Columbus, Georgia, out there in the distance. And you're supposed to holler out just as loud as you can, "Airborne." I mean, that's part of that spirit de corps. And this one trooper, he was about 1 or 2 in line before me, before I go up. And I remember he hollered up, "What are you?" And he hollered this just as loud as all the rest of the airborne. "I'm scared." But the first jump that I made, live aircraft, was aboard a C-119, flying boxcar. And the way that ship vibrated and shook, and in a way it was kind of a blessing to get out of it. But it was quite a sensation. But I loved it. I mean, I liked it so well. Well, it's a close kin to love. There's only 2 things I reserve for loving, and that's the Lord, and I love my wife, love my children, family. So I can't really say that in that category that I liked it very, very well.
It was more than the parachute jump over at Six Flags.
Oh, very definitely. Very definitely.
Let me go on and
Okay.
ask you, you got to Vietnam,
Yes, sir.
hot, humid. You were, oh, excuse me. You were there for about 7 months before you got
Yes, sir.
wounded.
Yes, sir.
Those 7 months, you rotate into the field for a day or 2 and then come back to a base, Mike? Is that about how it worked, or?
I'd say that's a real close description. Let me go through just a little bit of kind of going through the drill on what would happen. Say that and most of the time when we went out, we always engaged in battle, almost every time. But when we on the return, most of the time they would fly us back in by helicopter. We'd leave out a helicopter, drop us off, and then we'd go to our objective. Then at a certain time, we met our objective, then we'd regroup, get aboard helicopters, they'd fly us back in. And one of the first things we would do, because of all the humidity, we'd take care of our weapons. We'd go in and clean those up, oil them down real good, and we'd take care of our personal gear. And I left a part out there about our personal gear. That was another time the Lord saved my life. I was cleaning up my gear, and here it was. I had my Army belt on, and the canteen, of course, it goes onto that. And I've taken the canteen out of the cover, and I felt a hard object. I still have it at the house. And it was a sharp piece of shrapnel about this long, jagged, all the way jagged, probably about close to a half an inch thick at the thickest point. And here it was interlaced in this, the holster of my canteen. So it only missed my body maybe by a half an inch. I thought, whew, well, that was a close one. And I remember also about close ones up at Fouloy on the battle I described. They were, as I was loading the 81 millimeter mortar, there, from the enemy, there was pings, bullets bouncing off the barrel. And here it was. I knew to do my job, though. I was trained to do my job. It wasn't like I was a robot, but here I was serving in my position, and I knew somebody had to do it, and I had to do it. That's what I was trained for. And I was sliding these mortar rounds down in that tube, and bullets just bouncing off. And I remember one of my buddies in my platoon, his name is John T. Mudrick. He lives up in Oregon now. And after the battle and everything was over the next day, he said, Mike, he said, I'm going to put you in for a Bronze Star. And I said, John, I said, I appreciate it. Well, we called each other by last name, Mudrick. I said, I appreciate that, but I said, why don't you put it in for posthumously for one of these guys that got killed? Well, that's what you want, okay. I said, I'd rather. So, medals and things, campaign achievement awards and everything, they have their rightful place. And I don't have anything against anyone receiving those things. I just felt like some of those guys, in fact, I know they're very much more deserving than what I was. But I appreciate his recognition and what he shared with me. That's what he wanted to do.
When you were back in your base camp, Mike, did you sleep in a tent?
Yes.
Sandbagged?
We had sandbags on the outside. We also had a deep trench. If we had the guys up on guard, up in a big tower with a 50 caliber mounted on it. In fact, many times that thing would go off and we knew just instantly that we needed to hit the trench with our M16s, which we did. It was numerous times that. So there were many times when our sleep got interrupted, okay?
Your base camp.
Okay.
You have good chow hall. You have hot showers.
Didn't ever have any hot showers.
Did you have showers?
But we had showers at the base camp. And what once had been there before we arrived was a rubber tree plantation. And so all of these stumps were still in place. In fact, one of the sergeants I had on one of the operations we got the area pretty well secured. And a buddy of mine, we were together, and he said, "Hey, here comes some of these little peasant boys. He got some gook soda pops. That's what we call them, gook soda pops, for sale. I'm gonna get one of those." He said, "I think I will too." We just fixing to buy it, and here comes the sergeant. He said, "Don't get that. Don't buy them." So we just put on an act for him, act like we weren't going to get them. And as soon as he got out of sight, we went ahead and bought them. Well, respectively, I disobeyed an order, and he caught us. He said, "Y'all going to have some consequences when we get back to base camp, back there at Benoit." We did. While the rest of course, we took care of our gear and everything like what I shared there a while ago. As soon as everybody got just a little bit of free time, well, my buddy and me, we didn't get free time. We was out there on the rubber tree stumps, and with pry bar and an axe, I believe it was, we was cutting, digging those stumps out of the ground. So disobeying orders does have its consequences. So
When you went out, you spent your time in base camp, then you went out, 50-50 pretty much. You always go out in company strength. Sometimes you go out less than that.
now that one time that I said there was a lot of mistakes made, that was the best of my recollection, memory. That was the only time that ever happened.
You went out more platoon-wise?
No, we would go out because we were such a strike unit. We would go out maybe as much as battalion size. On a LRP, yes, maybe platoon size on the LRP, long range patrol. Okay, that's by foot. But on a mission, search and destroy. After that mishap back in February, we always went out more than larger than just company size. That mistake never did happen again, best of my knowledge.
Well, it's quite a story, sir. We appreciate you coming by and talking to us, Mike. Appreciate your time in the service, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it also.
You bet.